I want you to imagine a scenario. Just addressing this right to you, listening right now.
Right.
If you completely erase the borders between a massively wealthy region and a much poorer region, what happens next?
Well, you probably picture an immediate catastrophic flood.
Exactly. Like a tidal wave of cheap labor rushing across an invisible line.
Yeah, local jobs wiped out, instant crisis. I mean, that is the general assumption,
That's
right?
what everyone thinks.
It feels like basic physics, like high pressure just inevitably moves to low pressure. Poor workers will just flood rich markets.
Right. And that is exactly what Western Europe braced for back in 2004.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the European Union was about to undergo the absolute biggest expansion in its entire history. May 1st, 2004, 75 million Eastern Europeans suddenly got this, golden ticket.
The right to move freely.
Exactly, a geopolitical earthquake.
10 new countries joined the EU. We're talking Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic.
God.
Literally overnight, 75 million people from struggling economies suddenly held a passport that said they could just pack a bag, cross the border, and look for work in London or Paris or Berlin.
And the West absolutely panicked.
Total panic.
The headlines were apocalyptic. I mean, if you look back at the media from that time, people genuinely believed local livelihoods would be instantly, violently destroyed.
The fear was primal. Just this idea of, someone is coming to take what is mine.
Right. But the reality, the data tells a story that completely shatters that assumption.
It really does. Politicians on the left got it wrong. Politicians on the right got it wrong.
Because they both completely missed this hidden economic engine that actually controls the world.
Exactly. They were looking in the wrong place entirely.
So today we are taking a deep dive into the source material that exposes this ultimate blind spot of global politics.
It is fascinating stuff.
We are unpacking a massive 2017 study by top economists from Yale, Johns Hopkins, and the London School of Economics.
And the Portuguese Central Bank, too, a real dream team.
Yeah, these guys built a digital tracking system to uncover the truth about 2004. And the truth is going to totally dismantle everything you think you know about immigration, about free trade, and really just about how human beings actually make decisions.
Because the politicians, they were looking at the border, they were staring at people,
Right.
but they were completely blind to the invisible gears turning right underneath it. They really should have been staring at the shipping container.
Wait, shipping containers. This is where we need to completely reset our understanding.
Yeah.
We assume immigration is purely about people packing their bags and moving.
Yeah.
You are saying it is not.
Not even close. I mean, if you strip away the politics, you find the core discovery made by Lorenzo Caliendo and his brilliant team of researchers.
Okay, let's unpack this. What did they find?
They revealed a deadly, unbreakable link between tariffs,
Yeah.
the taxes a country places on imported goods, and human migration.
Tariffs and migration.
Yes, you absolutely cannot understand the movement of a human being without looking at the movement of a tomato. Or a car part. Or a piece of furniture.
Hold on. You were saying trade policy and migration policy are essentially the exact same thing?
There are two sides of the exact same coin. They are totally locked together.
Wow.
If you mess with the tax on a shipping container, you are secretly pulling strings that control whether a carpenter in Warsaw decides to move to London.
So the politicians were arguing about border walls and visas, just completely ignoring the massive volume of goods rolling through the gates.
Right. They were trying to drive a car by only looking at the speedometer, totally ignoring the steering wheel.
That is insane. They decoupled human beings from the economy they produce for.
Precisely.
But how do you actually prove that? I mean, you can't just guess at the motivations of 75 million people. How did this team of elite decoders actually track the winners and losers of a vanished border?
Well, you don't guess. You track the microdata, slicing through millions of human lives.
Right, because these aren't just pundits talking on TV.
No, these are world-class economists. They didn't rely on political narratives or media panic. They went straight into the European labor force survey.
And what time frame did they look at?
They pulled the data from 2002 all the way to 2007. We are talking about millions upon millions of highly specific data points.
Give me a sense of what that data actually looks like. What exactly were they tracking?
They tracked human beings by their exact skill level, by their nationality, by their physical location down to the regional level.
Like incredibly granular.
Very. They tracked where a specific worker lived 12 months ago versus exactly where they are working today.
They were basically tracking human atoms.
Pure, brutal math to answer the ultimate question of national rise and fall, like who actually wins when borders open.
Okay, but the opening of the borders wasn't actually a clean, fair experiment, was it?
Not at all.
Because when the curtain rose on May 1st, 2004, the West played a rigged game.
Oh, they completely rigged it.
Yeah.
The political compromise was known as the transitional rules, or the 2+3+2 rule.
Explain that for me.
Well, most of the old, wealthy Western allies, countries like Germany and France, they lost their nerve. They looked at the open border and blinked.
They caved to the domestic panic.
Exactly. They threw up temporary walls. They basically told the Eastern nations, yes, you are in the EU now, but you cannot actually work here for up to 7 years.
So they slammed the door shut on day one to protect their local workers.
Yeah. But if Germany and France closed their doors, where did the pressure go? Because not everyone closed up.
Right. This is the asymmetry that defined the whole era.
Exactly. While Germany and France hid behind these temporary 7-year walls, 3 countries did the exact opposite.
The UK, Ireland, and Sweden.
Yes. They ripped their doors completely off the hinges. Open access on day 1, 0 restrictions.
So you have a totally imbalanced continent. One side of the street is heavily barricaded, the other side is a total free-for-all.
Right.
Common sense says the UK, Ireland, and Sweden should have been immediately violently overrun.
The West absolutely braced for impact.
And then
Almost nothing happened.
nothing.
Silence. An anticlimax.
This is the part that completely breaks my brain. 3 full years after those Golden Gates opened. 3 years for people to pack up and leave the struggling East. What did the data actually show by 2007?
The proportion of Eastern Europeans living in the West had increased by an absolutely microscopic amount.
Define microscopic.
0.03%.
Wait, 0.03%. That is a rounding error. That is literally nothing.
It's statistically tiny.
I am genuinely struggling to understand this. You are an unskilled worker in a struggling Eastern economy. The UK is offering triple the pay. The door is wide open. Why on earth didn't they immediately rush to London or Stockholm?
I know, it defies basic economic logic, right?
Totally.
But it only defies logic if you assume humans are unthinking robots who just walk blindly toward the highest number.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense if you understand how humans actually process risk.
Walk me through the psychology of that risk. Because moving isn't just buying a cheap train ticket.
Exactly. Moving is arguably one of the most high-stakes, high-risk financial gambles a human being can make. You are leaving your entire support network.
You're risking whatever meager savings you have.
You have to navigate a foreign language, a foreign housing market, a totally foreign legal system.
It's terrifying. Even if the payoff is high, the upfront cost is massive.
Right. And in economics, we call the solution to this problem option value.
Option value.
But you don't need the academic term. Think of it as the secret power of waiting.
Like holding a stock to see what the market does.
Yeah.
Or a batter waiting for the absolute perfect pitch.
That's a perfect analogy. The decision not to move immediately is highly, highly rational. Put yourself in the shoes of a Polish carpenter in 2004.
Okay, I'm a Polish carpenter.
And you look at the map, Germany is closed, France is closed, the UK is open.
Right.
But what if Germany opens next year? Germany is geographically much closer to you. The cultural ties might be stronger.
And what if my own hometown economy suddenly booms? I don't know yet.
Exactly. You are holding your cards in a world of massive uncertainty. Different countries are slowly, unpredictably lifting their rules over a 7-year period.
So if I jump to the UK on day one, I burn a massive amount of cash to get there.
Right. And if Germany opens 2 years later, you are now locked into the UK. You missed the better opportunity.
So staying put, hoarding your cash, and waiting for the absolute best opportunity is infinitely smarter than just wandering blindly abroad on day one.
It is calculated patience. The workers in the East were playing a highly sophisticated waiting game.
Wow.
But the politicians in the West looked at this lack of movement and totally misread the room. They confused this highly calculated waiting game for permanent peace and quiet.
They thought they dodged a bullet. They didn't realize the water was just quietly building behind the dam.
Precisely. And while they were waiting, the wealth distribution of the entire continent was quietly flipping upside down.
Let's talk about that wealth distribution. Because we always hear a very specific narrative about globalization.
That it always favors the educated elite.
Right. The bankers, the software engineers, the managers, they are the ones who can move easily, who can leverage international markets.
That is the standard accepted narrative of the 21st century.
But the data from this study completely shatters that. Who were the absolute biggest winners of the 2004 EU expansion?
They were not the bankers. They were not the engineers. The ultimate winners were the unskilled workers in Eastern Europe.
The people at the very bottom of the ladder.
Yes. Their overall welfare skyrocketed. It went up by a net 1.71%.
And the high-skilled elites in the East, the people we assume always win.
They got crushed in comparison. The high-skilled Easterners only saw a 1.19% boost.
So the unskilled workers drastically outperformed them.
Absolutely.
Hold on. That defies every rule of modern globalization. Usually, the tech workers and managers consolidate all the wealth. How on earth did an unskilled worker in a rural Polish village out-earn an engineer in terms of welfare gains?
It comes down to the brutal reality of scarcity. It is basic supply and demand. You have to look at the wealthy Western countries in 2004. What did they already have plenty of?
Educated elites. They spent the last 40 years building service economies. They had plenty of middle managers.
Exactly. But what were they absolutely desperate for? Who was going to build the houses? Who was going to fix the plumbing? Who was going to pick the crops?
Unskilled labor.
Unskilled labor was the single most scarce resource in the West.
So the moment the borders opened, their potential value exploded.
Their potential value went through the roof. And remember that secret power of waiting we just talked about?
The option value.
Right, their option value skyrocketed. Suddenly, the lowest paid guy in a Polish village was the most sought-after asset in Western Europe.
You didn't even have to move to gain the leverage.
Exactly, just the threat that he could move forced local Eastern employers to raise his wages to keep him.
The system literally flipped upside down. The bottom became the top.
It's incredible.
But wait, if the East won so big, what happened to the West? Because politicians were screaming that it was a zero-sum game. If the outsiders win, the locals must bleed.
But the math says something entirely different. It was not a zero-sum game. Everyone gained.
Everyone.
Literally everyone. Overall, European welfare went up 0.62%, Eastern welfare went up 1.65%, and Western welfare went up 0.41%.
Break down the West for me.
Sure. Western high-skilled workers, their welfare gained 0.50%. Western unskilled workers, they gained 0.39%.
So the pie got bigger for everybody. The local Western workers actually benefited from the market expanding.
Yes. They got cheaper goods, a larger market to sell to, and an overall economic lift.
Okay, but I feel like there's a catch.
Oh, there is a massive, terrifying catch to these numbers.
I knew it. What is it?
These positive numbers, the fact that everyone won and the West didn't collapse, they rely on one single, incredibly fragile condition. If this one condition had failed, Western Europe would have been utterly slaughtered.
What was the fragile condition?
The condition was free trade. Zero tariffs on goods.
Okay, let me make sure I understand this. What would have happened if Europe opened its borders to people, allowing them to move freely, but kept the taxes on goods? Like if they kept taxing the tomatoes and the furniture coming out of the East.
If they did that, the data shows Western Europe's welfare curve would have nosedived straight into negative numbers.
Negative numbers.
Yes, they would have been absolute categorical losers in this expansion.
So letting people in, but blocking their goods, is mathematical suicide for a wealthy country.
Absolutely. Zero tariffs, completely free trade on goods was literally the final invisible shield protecting Western Europe from a devastating, overwhelming immigration shock.
The only reason the West survived the human border opening was because the goods border opened at the exact same time.
Yes.
But how do we even know this? How can anyone possibly know what would have happened? They didn't run two different Earths.
No, they didn't. This is where the economists had to become architects. They built a digital replica of the world's gears.
Like a massive simulation of the European economy.
Exactly, a digital twin of Europe.
Walk me through how you even begin to code something like that.
They use something called a dynamic general equilibrium model. But again, skip the jargon. Imagine a massive invisible web connecting every single city and town in Europe.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
They took a famous framework for understanding global trade, basically a gravity-defying network that calculates how goods flow based on distance and market size,
Right.
and they wired it directly into human psychology.
Meaning they link the physical shipping routes to human forward-looking decision-making.
Exactly. They digitized the invisible strings. They programmed a simulation where they could pull one string, like putting a 10% tax on a piece of machinery manufactured in Poland, and watch how that tax physically altered a specific human being's decision to buy a bus ticket to London.
They built a world where trade costs and human migration costs talk to each other in real time.
Yes, dynamically.
But there has to be a fatal flaw in this.
Yeah.
In the real world, you cannot measure exactly how much it costs a family to settle in a new country. It's impossible.
It is.
There are emotional costs, hidden fees, language barriers. How did they do the math without knowing the starting numbers?
This is where the researchers utilized a genius mathematical trick. It is a technique known as hat algebra.
Hat algebra. Okay, wait. So if I don't know the exact starting position of something, how does this work? Is it like testing a diet? You don't need to know my exact atomic weight or my bone density before and after. You just need to know the change on the scale.
That is exactly it. Hat algebra allows economists to measure the shadow to figure out how fast the person is running.
Okay, I like that.
Instead of trying to measure impossible baseline variables like exact human productivity in 2002, or the perfect, true psychological cost of a moving van in 2004, they strictly isolated the relative changes over time.
They skipped the absolute numbers and just looked at the delta. The difference.
Exactly. They skipped the unknown variables entirely, and by doing that, they could perfectly simulate a parallel universe, a universe where the EU never expanded.
Wow.
And they compared the economy of that parallel universe to our actual reality.
That is brilliant. They just calculated the gap between what happened and what could have happened.
Right.
And what did that gap reveal?
It revealed the invisible dam. Because free trade isn't just about buying cheap televisions. Free trade is a massive, invisible water dam holding back millions of desperate people.
Explain the mechanics of this dam to me.
Yeah.
How does taking taxes off a box of goods physically stop a human bearing from migrating?
Follow the chain reaction. The political borders open, but at the exact same moment, the tariffs hit zero.
Okay.
Eastern Europe can suddenly sell their manufactured goods easily and cheaply to the massively wealthy West.
The tax is gone, the goods flow out.
Right, and because the goods are flowing west in record numbers, what happens back home in the East?
The local factories start booming. They have to ramp up production to meet the Western demand.
Exactly. The local factories expand, the farms expand. Suddenly, the local demand for labor spikes. They need hands to build the goods going west.
And when the demand for local labor spikes...
Wages rise. Local hometown wages go up.
Yes. And suddenly that agonizing, terrifying urge to leave your hometown, to leave your family, to risk everything in a foreign country, it evaporates.
Because you can finally make a living right where you are.
Trade absorbed the shock of the population.
Yes. The demand for their labor was exported through the goods, instead of the human beings having to export themselves.
The shipping containers crossed the border so the people didn't have to. That is an incredible visual.
It really is.
And it completely dismantles the logic of politicians who say we need to shut down trade to protect local jobs. Shutting down trade literally forces people to cross your borders.
Yes. And we aren't just theorizing here. The simulation counted exactly how many people this free trade dam kept at home. We have the exact numbers.
Give me the numbers. How many people did free trade stop from migrating?
If Europe had opened its borders but not dropped tariffs to zero, the West would have been hit with an additional massive, desperate wave.
Massive.
We are talking about an extra 145,000 low-skilled migrants, plus another 130,000 high-skilled migrants.
Over 250,000 extra people just showing up.
Yes. The lack of free trade directly, mathematically translates into the heavy weight of human migration.
That's crazy.
If the factories in the East couldn't sell their goods, those 270,000 people would have had no choice. They would have packed their bags. Trade kept them happily at home.
So when you combine these two policies, open borders and open trade, you get this insane synergy.
It creates a compound premium. The interaction effect here is staggering. It is the ultimate compound interest of global policy.
How big is the premium?
Well, if you just open borders alone, you get a certain amount of economic benefit. People move to where they are needed. If you just open trade alone, you get a benefit. Goods move. but put them together, and it's not simply 1 + 1 = 2.
That's more.
Because the East had free trade, the welfare benefits they extracted from open borders were 12% higher than if they had just opened borders alone.
It multiplies. The free trade made their local economy strong, which gave their workers the leverage to negotiate better wages, whether they decided to move or stay. The trade empowered the people.
Exactly. So policymakers literally cannot look at immigration without looking at trade. It is economically illiterate.
It is flying a plane with one eye closed and half the instruments turned off.
Perfectly said.
This brings us to the underlying codes, the hidden math that dictates all of human movement. There is a specific number in this study that acts as the ruler of the world.
0.4.
There is a single number that dictates the chaos of European borders.
The researchers call it migration elasticity.
Migration elasticity, meaning how violently people react to a slight change in the cost of moving.
Think of it as a highly sensitive dial. The researchers calculated that dial is set at 0.44.
And what does that mean in the real world?
It means that Europeans are incredibly violently sensitive to the exact costs of moving.
So if a politician even whispers about a policy change, or if a subsidized train ticket goes away, or if rent in London goes up by just a fraction.
The human reaction is massive. It completely reverses human decision-making.
Wow.
People are hovering on a knife's edge, doing complex mental math about risk and reward every single day. A tiny tweak in the cost of migration creates an absolute demographic earthquake.
They are not a blind horde. They are highly rational actors calculating every single penny. And 0.44 is the proof of that calculation.
Extremely rational, which leads us to the next hidden code.
How's that?
The number that answers the most toxic question in politics. When an immigrant enters a country, who actually gets hurt and who gets promoted?
This is the core of the class division. The number is 4.0. But where did they find this number? Because they couldn't just guess at how humans replace each other in the workforce.
They had to use a genius method to find it. They looked for an exogenous shock, an outside event that forced the market to react.
And they found it in Portugal.
Yeah.
Why Portugal? What happened there?
Portugal provided incredibly detailed microdata tracking displaced workers from closed companies.
Okay.
When a company shuts down unexpectedly, it pushes its workers out into the open market. This creates a localized shock.
So they track those displaced workers to see exactly how easily a local low-skilled worker can swap places with a new immigrant? Yeah. How interchangeable are we really?
The answer is 4.0. That is the substitution elasticity.
What does 4.0 mean for the guy working on the factory floor?
It proves exactly how the gears grind when new labor arrives. If a wave of low-skilled immigrants arrives, the local low-skilled workers face direct friction.
They're highly substitutable.
Exactly. But the local high-skilled workers, they get promoted. They become the managers of the new labor.
They get pushed up the ladder while the guys at the bottom fight for the run.
Yes. The number 4.0 dictates the exact mathematical friction of that swap. It dictates who gets the corner office and who gets a pay cut.
It is the mathematical reason why working-class voters and elite voters have completely opposite visceral reactions to immigration. They are experiencing a totally different mathematical reality.
That's exactly it.
Okay, up until now, this sounds like a beautiful, elegant, mathematical utopia. Trade fixes everything. The pie gets bigger. The locals get promoted.
But the real world is not a spreadsheet.
Right. The real world has hospitals and schools and traffic jams.
And this is where the simulation meets brutal reality.
So what does this all mean for the average person who feels like things did genuinely get worse after 2004? Because a massive portion of the population feels that way, and they aren't just making it up.
And their feelings are mathematically validated by this exact study. We have to introduce the concept of public goods congestion.
Congestion, like a highway backed up for miles.
Exactly. When massive waves of immigrants arrive in a specific town, they bring valuable labor. They expand the market. That's good on paper.
Right.
But they also instantly dilute the quality of local schools, local roads, and local health care.
Because public resources cannot magically expand overnight to meet the new population. A factory can add a second shift in a week to build more cars. A city cannot build a new hospital in a week.
Or train new doctors.
Yeah.
Or build new schools. So the waiting room at the local clinic suddenly gets packed.
The elementary school class sizes double.
The roads jam. The immigrants are paying taxes, yes, but the physical infrastructure simply cannot keep up with the sheer volume of human bodies.
This is the legitimate agonizing pain point for local voters.
It is.
The economic gains of cheap labor, the fact that the pie got bigger, are completely overshadowed by the daily grinding frustration of a broken public infrastructure.
They are living the friction of the model.
Which brings us to the ultimate cautionary tale of this entire deep dive, the tragedy of the United Kingdom.
The UK really tried to be the hero of the 2004 expansion.
As we established earlier, the UK threw their doors wide open on day one. Unconditional access, while Germany and France hid behind walls.
They wanted to soak up all that incredible Eastern labor to fuel their economy.
And they took in the biggest wave of Eastern labor in the entire experiment.
They did.
And what actually happened?
Well, on paper, looking purely at factory output and corporate profits, their productivity exploded. The workers worked, wealth was generated.
Right.
But when the researchers added the crowded hospital and crowded school math to the simulation,
What happened?
the UK's overall welfare plummeted into negative numbers.
Negative numbers.
Yes, the productivity gains, all that shiny new wealth, were entirely eaten alive by infrastructure collapse.
The schools and roads just broke under the weight.
They really did.
We need to be completely neutral here, purely looking at the math. But this exact reality, this severe, agonizing strain on public goods in the UK, this is where the seeds of Brexit were firmly planted. May 1st, 2004. Not because of some abstract political ideology, but because of the brutal, undeniable math of public congestion. The system simply could not scale fast enough.
It is a tragedy of good economic intentions completely ignoring physical infrastructure limits.
Which exposes the ultimate danger of the single viewpoint. Why do politicians constantly get this so wrong?
Because they look at the world through a tiny straw.
Right.
If you run the math, but you deliberately strip out the effects of trade, or you strip out the effects of scale, or you strip out the effects of crowded schools, what do you get?
You get wildly fake numbers. You can torture the data to say whatever your political party wants it to say.
Exactly. If you ignore the scale of the expanding market, Western welfare drops by 0.06%.
And if you ignore the congestion,
If you ignore the congestion of the hospitals, Western welfare artificially rises.
policymakers who look at immigration without looking at trade policy and without massively funding infrastructure.
They are literally driving a car blindfolded at 100 miles per hour.
They were pulling levers completely disconnected from the machine and acting surprised when the machine tears itself apart. You cannot isolate a human being from the economy they consume and produce in.
Which brings us to the terrifying reality of today. We are looking at the gears of the world right now, and they are spinning backward.
Today, politicians everywhere, all over the globe, are screaming to build high walls. They want to return to isolationism, break the trade deals, stop the movement.
And this 2017 study gives us a definitive mathematical warning about exactly what happens when you do that.
Tearing apart the goods market from the human market does not protect local workers.
It actively, aggressively destroys their prosperity.
If you build a wall to stop people, but you also put up massive tariffs to stop goods, you destroy the local boom that keeps people home in the first place.
You create desperate migration.
You are dismantling the invisible dam. You are flooding your own valley to spite the river.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's summarize this mind-bending journey. We started with a simple assumption. Open borders mean an apocalyptic flood of cheap labor.
Right.
But we end with a completely different reality. Immigration isn't a human flood. It is a highly calculated, incredibly rational waiting game played by millions of people.
And that waiting game is controlled almost entirely by the invisible dam of zero tariff trade.
You drop the taxes on goods, the goods move, the jobs boom locally, and the people stay happily at home.
You block the goods, the local jobs die, and the people are forced to march.
Trade and migration are the exact same gear, just turning in opposite directions.
They are completely inseparable.
So think about your own country today. We are constantly debating immigration reform. We are constantly debating border walls and security.
It's all we talk about.
But ask yourself this, what is the trade policy attached to that border? Where is the invisible dam?
That is the real question.
If you squeeze the balloon on human movement without adjusting the pressure on trade and without massively funding your local public goods like schools and hospitals, where is that pressure going to violently explode next?
You can't just fix the machine by taping over the warning lights.
You have to understand the whole anatomy. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.